Hey, it's Terry Gorry, and this is the Irish Law and Small Business podcast. This video is different to the usual video that I put up on YouTube. It's a sort of an experiment, but if you're interested in buying residential property in Ireland, then you probably will be interested in it. It's an especially long episode or video. It's over an hour long. Now, it is made up of previous videos that I made. In fact, there's 12 videos brought together into one place, into this one video, on various topics about buying property in Ireland. For example, 7 steps to buying a house, naivety being your enemy when you're buying a property, the steps in buying a house start to finish, buying a property in Ireland from the UK, Europe or the United States, the frequently asked questions that I encounter, the timeline and payments that you make when you're paying and the various stages, the Help to Buy scheme, the First Home scheme, legal searches on closing day, the closing date of a property transaction, what actually happens, why you should carry out a pre-closing inspection, and finding the perfect property. Some advice on finding the perfect property. As I say, it's a long video. It may be an hour and 15 minutes or thereabouts, but if you are interested in buying residential property, then you might take the time to come back to it from time to time, or indeed binge watch it at perhaps the weekend, have a drink, have a cup of tea or whatever. The videos, as I say, in it, which comprise this longer video, I've already published on YouTube. But the whole purpose of this particular video, which, as I say, is over an hour long, is to actually gather together and make it easier for you to gather together into one place a lot of useful information about buying property. And I genuinely think it is useful information. So it will obviously save you the hassle of searching around on Google, searching around on YouTube, or indeed searching around on my channel to find the answer to your questions, because I think it's pretty comprehensive. Now, I'm going to put a link underneath the video to a free report that I give away. When you submit or give in your email, you put your email in a box, you sign up for the free report, and I give you a free report about buying or selling residential property in Ireland, and then I send emails after that on a weekly basis with some tips about buying property. You can unsubscribe anytime. It's completely free. There is no cost, and I respect your privacy. Hope you find the video useful. If you do, I'd appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below underneath the video. Thanks a lot. In this video, I'm going to take a look at 7 steps that might help you to simplify your house purchase. These are steps that I've sort of discovered and experienced down through the years. First one is location. Choose a good location if you can. There is a well-known truism: the day you buy is the day you sell. So you can change a lot of things about your house, but you'll never be able to change its location. You can improve it, you can extend it, you can convert it, you can knock it, but you cannot change its location. So my advice would be to get the worst property in the best area to fit your budget, not the best property in the worst area, because, as I say, you cannot change your location. Second thing you need to be concerned about and take very seriously is the question of finances. Make sure that your budget will cover all outlays and all costs that you're going to incur. So you being a purchaser, if you're borrowing money, then you're going to have a bank valuation to pay for. It's recommended then, if you're getting a second-hand property, that you get a structural survey. You're going to have stamp duty to pay as well, which will probably be 1% of the purchase price. You're going to have to pay a solicitor, professional fee, legal fee for conveyancing. You're going to have to pay property registration authority fees to register the change of ownership and register you as the new owner of the property and register the mortgage. And you're going to have other necessary outlays for the conveyance. For example, legal searches will have to be carried out on closing day, and you'll also have fees in relation to the Commissioner for Oaths. That's for swearing documents and so on. Third tip I would give you would be in relation to negotiation. You need to negotiate shrewdly and coolly and calmly. I've made a video about negotiating, a number of videos actually about negotiating on my YouTube channel, but one of the one of the most important and effective tips that I've discovered down through the years is that when you get serious and you're getting towards the end of the negotiations, offer a very specific, odd, uneven number as your final offer, not a round number. For example, 194,600 as your best and last offer, not 195,000, because 195,000, quite frankly, does not look like your final offer. It looks like another negotiation or another bid in the negotiation process. Whereas if you go to the vendor or the estate agent and say, look, I am absolutely flat to the mat. I've got money from everywhere that I can. Family and friends have chipped in, and what I have now is this figure. If it's an uneven, odd number, it's going to look more credible as your best and final offer. Number 4, second-hand property, get a structural survey carried out. If a sale doesn't go ahead and you don't get the house, it will still be money well spent, because it will mean that you have avoided an absolute lemon, and that's important. A structural survey, you must be aware, is not a bank valuation. Don't confuse the two. The bank valuation is for the lender, the structural survey is for you, and it's to allow you to make a sound decision as to proceed with the property purchase or not. Ensure that your surveyor has professional indemnity insurance, and forget about getting a well-known or a well-meaning friend or relation to have a look over the house, because quite frankly they may or may not know what they're doing. But bottom line is, you really do want a professional who will be familiar with the building regulations and will be able to identify any work that might have been carried out and that might have needed planning permission. Your friend, your father, your uncle who is a builder may or may not be able to identify these things, so that's why you get a professional. Planning then, do your own research in relation to planning. You can do a planning search in your local authority, the local county council or wherever if you want. Check that the area, though, that there's no developments in the pipeline which might affect your decision. If you, for example, checked out the area, kept an eye on the Facebook pages of relevant community groups perhaps in the area, you'll get a good feel for what's going on. You'll get a good feel for any developments that might be in the pipeline that might be injurious. For example, a new dump, a recycling centre, a meat factory. Things of that nature can affect your enjoyment of your property and can affect the value of your property. Number 6, lenders' requirements. Ensure you have all the lenders' requirements in place at an early stage. This will include life assurance, mortgage protection that is, and home insurance. The lender will not release your loan check until their requirements are met. Your solicitor will tell you what other special conditions are in the loan offer. Have a look at it yourself though, and just see is there any special conditions. If you're getting a gift, for example, from a friend or a relation, a parent perhaps, then you may need a deed of confirmation. Check that with your solicitor, check it with the lender, because it'll hold things up if you have left outstanding special conditions, because the bank simply will not release the money. And remember, in this equation, the bank has the money. The most common hold-up I find is life assurance assignment is not sent in, or the life assurance is not in place, and the property insurance is not in place with the interest of the lender noted if it's, for example, an apartment or a multi-unit development. But the bottom line is you will need life assurance and you will need home insurance. Choose your solicitor well. Buying or selling property is a stressful time. One of the best ways to reduce stress is to know what's going on. So communication from your solicitor is vital to reduce this stress. Yeah, if you know what's going on, obviously it's very, very helpful, and it's a less stressful event and proceeding. I have a free report. You can get it on my website there. My website is businessandlegal.ie. There's a page there with some free reports on it. I give away a free report in relation to buying or selling residential property in Ireland. It's useful enough, and you might be interested in getting it. It's free. You insert your email and it'll be sent directly to your inbox. I hope you find this video useful, and if you do, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot, and thanks for watching. I've made videos before about the danger for anyone buying property of being naive. It's particularly acute. The danger is particularly acute if you're a first-time buyer or if you're buying in Ireland from abroad. It's one of the biggest things that you really need to guard against. And I've heard one or two difficult stories, to put it mildly, of people who naively purchased a property and basically believed everything that they were told, regardless of who told them the statements that they relied on. And they bought it basically hook, line and sinker. And they're now in a difficult position in terms of having bought a property, which second-hand property, it's a question of buyer beware, caveat emptor, and it's going to be very, very difficult for them to rescue the situation. Some of us appear to be built or are born with some sort of an inbuilt bullshit meter, some sort of an inbuilt skepticism and an aversion to trusting things as they are claimed or appear to be. Some of us are more trusting with a willingness to believe greater quantities of what we're told. If you're buying property in Ireland from abroad, or if you're buying as a first-time buyer and you've no experience, then you really need to be in the group that has the bullshit meter built in and has the aversion to believing everything. You can believe some stuff, you can accept some stuff, but my view would always be to trust or believe but verify. So avoid naivety, listen carefully, but carry out your own checks, trust but verify, shoot the breeze but recognise that you cannot rely on everything that you're told, especially when it comes to property. Let's face it, if you have a poor property that will be difficult to sell and you're looking at a sort of a financial millstone around your neck for the next 10 or 20 years, it's going to be easy for you to tell a few porkies, a few white lies. It's going to be easy for you to over-egg the pudding. It's going to be easy for you to exaggerate or engage in some hyperbole. So if that's the case, you make sure that you're not the person walking into such a situation. If you're a potential buyer walking into this sort of a situation, I hope you can see the problem that might arise. If you rely on what you're told, regardless of whether it's the vendor or the estate agent or some surveyor or anybody else for that matter, neighbours, etc., always be skeptical, carry out your own checks, but don't believe everything that you're told. If you do, then you're going to be in difficulty and you may well wade into a situation where you make an investment, your dream home will quite frankly become a nightmare. So believe nothing, do your own research, carry out your own checks, get a survey from a trusted surveyor or engineer, and remember that if you're buying especially a second-hand house, you do buy it in the condition that it's in. It's very much a question of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So trust but verify. That's what I believe you should do. And you need to guard against and avoid naivety in believing everything that you're told, because there's too much at stake, both for the vendor and for the purchaser. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, I'd appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up down below. And you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel. I make videos about Irish law, business, Irish business, small business, entrepreneurship, and that sort of thing. Thanks a lot. Today I want to look at the steps in buying a property in Ireland. What are the various steps? The first step is that you as a purchaser will find a house, presumably that you're sufficiently interested in, to put a bid on. You will, after a period of time, hopefully be successful with the bidding process, and you will be advised by the estate agent or auctioneer that you're the successful purchaser. Congratulations. And the estate agent and the auctioneer will be looking for your solicitor's details. It's at that point that you need a solicitor, because you're going to be asked to pay a booking deposit to the auctioneer. This could range from 5,000 to 10,000, but for a typical house of 250 to say 350, 375,000, you're probably looking at a booking deposit of 5,000 to 7,500, that sort of range. But once you go into the estate agent to pay the booking deposit, you are going to be asked who your solicitor is. The person or the purpose of this question is so that the estate agent will let his vendor's solicitor, his client's solicitor, know who's acting for you. And at that stage then, once that information is communicated to the estate agent, he can contact the vendor solicitor and give him the details, give him or her the details. So you'll have paid a booking deposit. The vendor solicitor will be then in a position to issue contracts because the estate agent will have been in touch and will advise the vendor solicitor who has purchased the property and who is acting for you. Next step then is the vendor solicitor will issue contracts along with copied title documents to prove title. When they are issued, then they're obviously sent to me or the purchaser solicitor, whose job it is then to review the contracts and review the title documents that are being offered. Part of this process will involve raising what's called pre-contract inquiries. On my YouTube channel I have a video dealing with the typical pre-contract inquiries that are raised by solicitors. But once I raise the queries in relation to title and taxation and planning and any other issues that may arise, once I've received satisfactory replies, it's at that stage then that I can invite my client in, the purchaser, to sign the contracts. Now, it's important at the same time that the purchaser, unless he or she is lucky enough to be a cash purchaser, has finance arranged. And if that's the case, then the lender, the bank, will want to know who is acting for you as purchaser. You let the bank know, and the bank will then issue the loan or loan pack, including letter of offer and the various security documents, to your solicitor. Your solicitor then, in trying to do things most efficiently, will invite you in to sign both contracts and the acceptance of the loan offer and the security documents for the bank. That just saves 2 trips rather than, or have 1 trip rather than coming in twice. Once you sign the contract, then you're going to sign it in duplicate and you're expected to pay a 10% deposit. So if the house is 250 grand or say 350 grand, 10% of 350,000 is 35 grand. You subtract the booking deposit of 5 grand. Therefore, you must pay a contract deposit of 30,000 if the house is 350,000. Obviously, if it's 250,000, then the booking deposit or the contract deposit is 25 grand. Booking deposit is 5 grand. You have to pay 20. You sign both contracts. You sign the letter of offer, acceptance of the offer from the bank, and I then return the contracts to the vendor solicitor. That, from a legal perspective, is an offer to purchase the property. There's no binding contract in place yet. It's simply an offer to purchase the property. The vendor solicitor will then get his client or clients in to sign or countersign the contracts. And the vendor solicitor will retain 1 copy or 1 counterpart and send the other one back to me. Once that's sent back to me, there's a binding contract in place and you are heading towards completion. Between that binding contract coming into existence and completion, the vendor solicitor will get his or her client in to sign various documents. For example, the deed of transfer, the statute declaration in relation to Section 72, family home declaration, perhaps a declaration in relation to planning, and so on. Those, the deed of transfer will have been drafted by your solicitor, me, and sent to the vendor solicitor. But once the vendor's solicitor gets the vendor in to sign all the documents, they will be in a position to complete, assuming that they're able to give vacant possession. In other words, they're able to move out on a particular day. In relation to the closing date, the typical contract will have a closing date of, say, 4 weeks or 5 weeks from the date of the contract. That's typical, but it could be slower or it could be faster. It really will depend on the circumstances. For example, if the vendor has nowhere to move, or perhaps are buying on, then things can get more complicated and get a bit messy, because they may be waiting to purchase a house and complete on the purchase of a replacement dwelling. That can get messy. They may be buying a new house, and the new house may not be completed yet. That can be a further delay, so that's just something that can happen. On the other hand, you might have a vendor who has plans made, perhaps has another house, or has moved somewhere else, or is moved into rented accommodation, or maybe has moved jobs and has had to move in any case, in which case vacant possession won't be a difficulty. But with a view then towards completing the transaction and moving towards completion on closing day, the vendor will get his client in to sign all the necessary documents, and I then, on your behalf, will be contacting the lender to check what's outstanding for check release. Check release is known colloquially as check release, but in fact it's an electronic funds transfer to my client account. That's where the loan comes. I'll then do a spreadsheet out and I'll send it to you, and I will calculate exactly what I need from you to complete the transaction. And that spreadsheet, I call it a required to close document. In other words, it's a document that simply sets out the money stuff and what is required to complete the transaction. And I'll take into account the loan that I'm going to be getting from the bank on your behalf. Once you put me in funds then for the balance, I'm in a position to complete the transaction. Assuming that the vendor has got all the closing documents ready to send to me and they can give vacant possession on closing day, then the vendor is ready to close. On closing day then you could carry out a closing day inspection or an inspection the day before that. But on closing day I then ensure that the money is transferred to the vendor solicitor, and he holds that money in trust pending completion. The vendor solicitor will send all the closing documents to me, and I will hold the closing documents in trust pending completion. When we're both satisfied, then we will complete the sale. I will authorise release of the funds, the money, and he will authorise release of the keys from the estate agent. You will then go to the estate agent, pick up the keys and move in, hopefully. I then will send in the necessary documents to the Property Registration Authority to register the change of ownership and to register the charge for the bank on the folio. I will also pay the stamp duty on your behalf, so I'll need PPS numbers and so on. After the Property Registration Authority has registered the change of ownership and has registered the charge, then we get a notice of completion. Once that happens, everything then is sent, all the title documents rather, are sent to the lender, and the lender will hold those documents until either the loan is paid off or you're going to sell again. I think that is pretty much it. I think that is it from start to finish. They are the steps in a transaction to purchase a property, and if you find this video useful, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or contact me by email. So as I say, they are the steps in purchasing a property in Ireland, and I hope I haven't left anything out. I don't think I have. Thanks for watching, and as I say, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot. Okay, it's a beautiful July day here in Ireland. I think it is the 18th of July 2021. I'm making this video. I made a video there last year or the year before about buying property in Ireland, about buying a rural property and what you should be looking for. And I'm going to link to that video in this one up here, I think, when it comes up on YouTube. Buying a rural property, or buying a property in Ireland, or something of that nature. This is a sort of a second bite of the cherry, because quite frankly the sound on the last one was a little bit affected by, or was badly affected, to be honest with you, by the wind. There was a little bit of wind that day. There's a small bit of a breeze today, but it's an absolute scorcher of a day here in Ireland. Yesterday it was 30 or 31 degrees. Today it's expected to be the same. This is not typical Irish weather, but that's what we're getting at the moment. I'm not complaining, it's beautiful. In this video though, I want to recap on a couple of things that I touched upon the last time about buying a property in Ireland, buying a rural property in Ireland, especially property in the country, not a 3-bed semi or a 4-bed semi or a 4-bed detached house in a town or a city, a rural property, a typical sort of cottage or fixer-upper, that sort of a situation. Now, since I made the last video, and I think it was a year or two ago, it may even have been 2 years ago, I think I made that video a couple of years ago, but since then I've actually had quite a bit of interest from overseas people, people coming from the UK, from Germany, from Malta, from the United States, looking to buy property in Ireland, and I'm happy enough obviously to assist them and provide the legal services and so on, the conveyancing services. They've been in touch with me, and I've had various clients, I've had various Zoom consultations and telephone calls and so on. People from UK, as I say, people from the United States, people from Germany, people from Malta, people from other parts of Europe, buying property, coming back here from France, buying property in Ireland, all over Ireland. The first thing you need to understand from my perspective is it doesn't make any difference what part of the country you are buying in, because it's a desk-based exercise from a legal perspective. So I don't go and physically check out the property. I can do my job from the office because I'm reviewing contracts and looking at legal documents. You, on the other hand, will have the difficulty, and you need to consider this yourself, the difficulty of finding the right property, doing your bit of market research, your bit of due diligence, finding the right property, finding the right part of the country, wherever you're going to be happy. And obviously I'd have to strongly recommend that you come to Ireland and see what it's like if you haven't been here before, and what part of the country is going to suit you best. And you may change your mind when you come, and you may decide Kerry or Cork is for you, and then you might, when you come, you might decide to instead go to the west coast, Mayo or someplace instead, or Donegal or whatever. So it's a good idea to come and do your due diligence. So, as I say, I can do the legal stuff, no difficulty whatsoever, because, as I say, a solicitor is involved in a desk-based exercise, and we check the planning documents, we check the title documents, we check the contracts, and we advise you on all that. You, on the other hand, are going to have to find the right property. You're going to have to carry out your inspection or your physical inspection, organise a structural survey, which I would strongly recommend, and have a look at the property yourself, obviously. Getting a surveyor and so on, I can get you a surveyor if it's within 5-10 miles from my office in Enfield, which is on the east coast of Ireland. However, getting a surveyor on the west coast of Ireland, or some other part of Ireland which is 100 miles away or 150 miles away, I don't know anybody, quite frankly. Now, I may well be able to find somebody for you, but my surveyors would deal generally locally here. Surveyor is not a big issue, but I would strongly recommend that you get one, and I strongly recommend as well that you speak to the surveyor first and establish exactly the ground rules of what they are going to do for you, what they're going to look at, what they're going to cover, and more importantly, what they're not going to cover, because there's no point getting a report that's going to cost you a right few bob, and it is so heavily qualified with disclaimers and waivers and so on that it's useless to you. You need to know whether the property is structurally sound or not, okay? So I'm thinking, for the sake of this video, we'll take a sort of a rural property, we'll take a sort of a cottage or perhaps a fixer-upper or something of that nature, but the same sort of principles will apply anyway. Now, the last time I made the video, a year ago or 2 years ago, I walked down the road there, and it was a windy day. The sound on my video was crap, quite frankly. I had a new camera, or I had a new microphone, and it was very poor. It didn't work out well. I'm hoping today will be better. It's a calm day, there's no wind. I'm going to walk down the road again, and I'm going to have a look at the cottage that we looked at the last time. And as I say, I link to that video up here on the right. You can have a look at it then, and you can have a look now, because it's been improved significantly, and it may be a project similar to one that you might be having in your mind as to, you know, what you're going to buy. You might be looking to buy a cheap property, do it up, and, you know, live happily ever after in Ireland. If that's your dream, that's your dream. That's fair enough. But we'll go now, we'll have a look at it, and we'll walk down the road and just see what's been done. I'm not going to go into the property. They are clients of mine. They've done a nice job, but you'll see what's possible, and I'll touch upon again the things you need to be concerned about when you are buying a rural property. Okay, so let's go. Okay, we're just heading out here now, out of my place, and here's my bird feeders, as you can see there. Birds have gone quiet this weather. They're still coming around all right, but not nearly as vigorous as they used to be. So whether it's the time of the year or the weather or what, I don't know. I'm going to go out here now to this rural road that I live on and walk down to the left and see exactly the little cottage that was renovated. Obviously a fabulous day. You're not going to be buying your property in Ireland for the weather, but sometimes we do get real bonus weather, fabulous weather, and this is one such time, so it's quite unusual, but it's great to get it. Okay, the first vital question you need to look at is this road that I'm on here. Is it in charge of the local authority? In other words, if you were buying a property on this road, is this property, or is this road rather, in charge of the local authority? And therefore you have legal right of way to get down to your property, assuming that you bought down here. The same principle, the same question applies no matter what part of the country you're going to buy in. Access to your property is vital. Legal access is vital. So the road is going to be in charge of the local authority, or it could be a boreen, there could be a right of way. The right of way may or may not be established. It may or may not be registered. It's vitally important that you find out these things beforehand, and that's where the solicitors come in, that's where the legals come in, because you don't want to find out later on that you've bought a property, you're exercising what you believe to be a right of way, you're walking down to your property or driving down, and the next thing is there's some farmer out saying you've no right to be going down there, there's no right of way, that last man sold you a pup, and that's not the case at all, so you need to check that, okay? Okay, this is the property here that we had a look at the last time we were out. I was out, and they've done a nice job on it. As you can see, they have put a new roof on it, they have extended it. I know there's an extension, and there is another entrance here now. They've probably done up inside quite significantly too. They have pebble dashed the outside of it to make it warmer. They've obviously put new windows in it, and they've a second entrance here now, which will be nice when it is finished off with some sort of tarmac or pebbles or whatever way they're going to do it. But that's the little cottage we had a look at the last time, and the issues surrounding that are the issues that you need to consider carefully. So the issues you need to consider carefully are: this road, is it in charge of the local authority? Or is the road access to the property that you're looking at, that you're proposing to buy, is it in charge of the local authority in Kerry or Mayo or wherever, Cork, wherever you're going, wherever you're buying the property? That's the first thing. It may not be. There may be a right of way. The right of way may be registered. It'll be marked yellow on a property registration authority folio map. If that's the case, that's fine. Absolutely nothing to worry about. But that does need to be checked. The second thing you need to consider if you're buying in a rural area like this is the services. And when I talk about services, I'm talking about sewerage, waste, water obviously. You have to dispose of your sewage somehow, and water. Where's the water going to come from? So just to be clear, if you're in a rural place like this, you're not going to be on the mains water. The likelihood is you're going to need your own well, or there may well be a group water scheme, but you're going to need one thing or the other, but you need to check that situation. The wastewater, the sewerage situation, again, you're not going to be on the mains, you're going to need your own septic tank, your own envirocycle or biocycle system, or whatever way it's described, you know what I mean. There is a lot of sewerage going to come out of your house, especially if you have a family, or indeed if it's just yourself and your partner or whatever. The sewerage obviously needs to be disposed of. The wastewater needs to be disposed of, washing dishes and washing clothes and so on and so forth. So you're going to need some sort of a sewerage system. They're the services: water, sewerage and road access. They're the key things. After that then it's the property itself that you need to have a look at, get a structural survey done. Your difficulty though will be in, I suppose, carrying out inspections and getting a surveyor, and perhaps getting tradespeople in a local area where you mightn't have any contacts. But that's, I suppose, part of the thrill and part of the peril and part of the experience of going to a foreign country, moving to a foreign country, or indeed moving yourself, if you're an Irish person, around the country and moving from a town or city to a rural place and buying a property, doing it up, or perhaps you'll be buying one that's already in good nick, which is well and good, but the services are vital, the road is vital. I have no difficulty acting for you if you're coming from the UK or the United States or anywhere else, but I'd be happy to help. But you need to consider the practical steps you need to take as well, just in terms of opening a bank account, getting a PPS number. There's no difficulty with a non-Irish person or a non-EU person buying property in Ireland. All they need, quite frankly, is a tax number, a PPS number, that allows them then to pay the stamp duty on the property when they buy it. And that's really it. So you need to get a PPS number. You're going to need a bank account probably, and you need to carry out your due diligence, but your due diligence, most of it will be carried out by the solicitor. But remember, the solicitor will be able to do the planning stuff, will be able to do the title documents, will be able to review the contract, but will not be carrying out a physical inspection of the house. And you need to be careful in that regard. Get a structural survey. Hope you find this video useful. I think you probably should watch it in conjunction with the previous one that I did a while back. I'll fix it up, or I'll put a link up there this side. You can have a look at it. As I said, the sound on the last one was dodgy. Hopefully the sound in this one will be okay. I think it should be. So if you want to hit me up, my contact details are at the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your purchase.
In this video I'm going to take a look at buying a house in Ireland. I am a solicitor and I do quite a bit of property law, a lot of conveyancing, and I have, leaving aside the solicitor profession, a lot of experience in buying and selling property over the last, I think it's, well, since the mid-1980s. I bought my first property when I was 23. I've bought and sold a lot of properties since then. Residential properties, commercial, investments, fixer-uppers, new properties, apartments, houses, commercial properties, shops, and so on. So I have a good bit of experience in buying and selling property. I understand the process that's involved, and then obviously being a solicitor as well, I do a lot of property on a daily basis in my solicitor's practice. In this video I'm going to have a look at questions that have come up. I'm just having a look on my Samsung Galaxy tablet. I had a couple of videos there this morning. I was researching them on YouTube about buying a house in Ireland, and a lot of questions in the comments, and I thought I'd have a look at those questions and answer them, because they are questions that I have seen being asked repeatedly. So I think it would be a useful exercise. Leaving aside this video, which is not going to be a step-by-step for buying a house or anything of that nature, because I've done that type of video and have plenty of videos about property, about the property buying process, the conveyancing process, what to look out for, new properties, second-hand properties, apartments, houses, and so on. I've done plenty of videos about those topics, which you can find on my YouTube channel. But in this one I want to look at the specific questions that appear to come up fairly regularly, and I'm using as a resource the existing video or videos that are on YouTube, and obviously people's comments are underneath and there's questions there, so that's what I'm going to have a look at. Okay, I hope you find it useful if you're looking to buy a house in Ireland. First question, at what step should you have a solicitor? You don't need a solicitor until you go sale agreed. When you go sale agreed, you will need a solicitor, regardless of whether you are a cash buyer or a mortgage buyer, because once you go sale agreed, the estate agent is going to want to instruct the vendor's solicitor to issue contracts. So at that point, you'll need to identify, when you're paying the booking deposit, who your solicitor is, so that contracts and title documents can be sent out to your solicitor. Any difference if a cash buyer? Not really, no. Not from sending out contracts perspective. Obviously, from the point of view of borrowing money and not being a cash buyer, you need to let the bank know, let the lender know who your solicitor is, because the lender will want to send out the loan offer to your solicitor so that the solicitor can have a look at the terms and conditions, the special conditions of the loan offer, and advise you on that. At what point in this process would you do the building inspection? You should get, if you're carrying out, or if you're buying a second-hand house, you should get a structural survey carried out. So obviously the time to get a structural survey carried out is before you sign the contract. So any time before you go sale agreed, or between going sale agreed and signing the contract, that's the time you need to do your structural survey, because there's no point finding out after you've signed the contract that there is significant problems with the property, which will be identified in the structural survey. So any time between going sale agreed and signing the contract is when you would want to have a building inspection or structural survey carried out. I have a couple of videos on my channel as well about structural surveys and what should be covered in those. It's not just the structure of the property, boundaries and so on should be looked at as well. Boundaries on the ground versus the folio, and some other things would need to be looked at. So have a look at those videos on my YouTube channel about structural surveys. Somebody else here is saying, I had a quote of €1,750 plus all the other fees, which seemed excessive. That's not the case at all. It's not excessive. That'll be the standard conveyancing fee. Could range anything from $1,200, $1,250 plus VAT up to $5,000 plus VAT. But something like $1,500 or $1,750 or thereabouts would be standard enough, plus all the other fees. All of the other fees are outlays and costs which will be incurred. They have nothing got to do with the solicitor, nothing got to do with legal costs. They have to do with stamp duty, which is payable to the state. That's a tax, essentially, property registration authority fees, and other necessary outlays and costs which will have to be incurred, and they wouldn't be part of the professional legal fee. Another question there, any advice on how to find a solicitor, especially when non-Irish and non-resident? I have plenty of clients who've come to me from outside of Ireland, who've contacted me through my website, through my YouTube channel, through my email. So shop around, make inquiries, look for quotations, and see how responsive the solicitor is who you're contacting, and that'll probably give you a good indication and a good feel for how responsive they're going to be through the process. And just on that, in terms of choosing a solicitor, it's a desk-based, legal, paper-based exercise from a solicitor's perspective. So you could get a solicitor in any part of the country who could act for you regardless of where your property is located, because the solicitor will not be doing a physical inspection. It'll be a desk-based exercise. It'll be title documents, land registry folios, registry of deeds, or whatever. Is it true a PPS is needed to buy property in Ireland? Strictly speaking, a PPS number is not necessary to buy a property in Ireland, but you will need it to pay the stamp duty. So in order to be registered as the owner and to pay the stamp duty in accordance with the law, you will need a PPS number. Even if you're from outside Ireland, it's relatively easy and relatively straightforward to obtain a PPS number and make the application online. So you should do a search on Google, how to obtain a PPS number from outside Ireland, and you will be directed to the appropriate page of the relevant government website, government department website, and that'll give you an online application form and contact details and so on. It's relatively straightforward, there's no big deal there. This gentleman has a confusion, has a question. Some of the houses are only available for a lease of 100 years and then you need to return the property back. No, you don't. If you have a lease, a long lease property, so the property is not freehold, it's not held in fee simple, it's held on long leasehold. The lease could be 100 years, it could be 250 years. That's of no real concern. It's the equivalent of freehold, because even on the expiry of the 100-year or 250-year lease, you are by law entitled to a new lease in any event. So don't worry about a long leasehold property. It could be 250 years, it could be 500 years, makes no difference. It's the equivalent of a freehold property, so there should be no concern there. Somebody else here then is contacting or making a comment on this video about trying to buy a property hunt in Ireland from South Africa, and they're finding it incredibly stressful and frustrating. And basically they're saying they've contacted a huge amount of estate agents and have had no return or no call back. That's unfortunate, but they really need to focus not so much on the estate agents but on the individual properties. If they have an interest in individual property, then that particular estate agent should certainly be calling them back, and it would be very unprofessional and very foolish not to do so, especially when they are cash buyers. Question: if you're in the USA and want to just buy a house in Ireland cash, is it possible? Yes, there's no difficulty with that whatsoever. The only thing you'll need to do, there's no legal impediment on you, the only thing you will need to do is obtain a PPS number, a tax number, in order to pay the stamp duty within a certain period of time after purchasing the property. But there's no difficulty, there's no legal impediment on an outsider, on a non-Irish person, on an American or an EU citizen buying property in Ireland. There's no problem. Question here: I have cash, about 250,000 K or 250,000 euro. Do I need an auctioneer? No, you don't need an auctioneer, but you do need to find the property. It's up to you to find the property. It will be difficult, obviously, if you're trying to source properties from outside Ireland, but if you're in Ireland, then obviously you must do your own hunting, I suppose. There is the odd property source service, property sourcing person. I've come across one or two on the likes of LinkedIn and so on, so you will find somebody like that, and it may well be worth your while to obtain the services of some person like that, because obviously if you're outside Ireland and you're trying to house hunt, property hunt, it's going to be very, very difficult, because you're going to be relying on perhaps videos and the internet and so on. But it would be useful to have somebody on the ground, I suppose, to go and have a look at a house for you, and obviously you would be down the line then getting a structural survey carried out and so on. But there is a difficulty in trying to locate and trying to make inquiries about houses and properties from outside Ireland, because it will be just more difficult. So it would be worth your while probably investigating and seeing, can you find a professional. And I do know a lady down the country, I think she's in Waterford, who does this sort of thing. I see her on LinkedIn, but I just can't for the life of me remember her name just at the moment. That's it. I hope I've answered some questions that might have crossed your mind, or you might have had. Check out my YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos on there about property. As I say, I'm buying and selling property for a long time, and I also, as a solicitor, act in conveyances every day of the week, quite frankly, apart from the weekend, obviously, even though I get queries at the weekend as well. So I hope you find this video useful. If you do, hit the thumbs up button down below and give it a like. I would appreciate it. Thanks a lot. One of the questions I'm regularly asked by young people, especially somebody who's buying their property for the first time, or buying a property for the first time, is about the money. When do they make the payments, and so on and so forth.
So when you go sale agreed with a property, be it a new or a second hand, you're going to pay a booking deposit. And the booking deposit would be typically 5 grand. Anything between 2,500 and 10,000, depending on the value of the house. But typically around about 5,000. That's the booking deposit. It's fully refundable. Once the booking deposit is paid, then the vendor solicitor will issue contracts to your solicitor, the purchaser's solicitor, and your solicitor then will review the contracts, review the title documents, and assuming that you've got finance arranged, will then get you in within perhaps a fortnight or 3 weeks, depending on how quickly you get finance arranged, and get you in then to sign the contracts and sign the contract and the loan documents rather. So at that point then you must pay the contract deposit, and the contract deposit is 10% of the purchase price. But you can take off the contract deposit, the booking deposit that you've paid. So just to give you a simple example, let's say you're buying a house for 300,000. The contract deposit then is going to be 10% of that, and 10% of 300,000 obviously is 30 grand. And you take off 5 grand that you paid as a booking deposit. So you're going to pay 25 grand then with the contract. That's what's expected in relation to the second hand property. Then you will eventually move towards completion, and your solicitor and the other solicitor will prepare for that, and obviously you'll have to ensure that everything is in place to draw down your loan offer, your loan funds. And when there is a closing date then and the property transaction is ready to complete, that will be the point at which you will have to pay the balance of the purchase price, stamp duty, your solicitor's fees, property registration authority fees, miscellaneous fees, for legal searches, for commissioner for oaths, and that's really all of it. But you only need to do that on completion, for completion. And obviously the loan that you're getting will be drawn down then by your solicitor with a view to completing. And typically completion will take place 4 to 5 weeks after there's binding contracts in place. So typically 4, 5, 6 weeks after you have signed contracts, and you'd probably sign contracts 2 weeks perhaps after you've gone sale agreed. That's the sort of time scale you're looking at for a second-hand property, and that's the sort of pattern or schedule of payments that you're going to make. So ranging from, as I say, in the first instance, a booking deposit, to eventually paying the entire balance of the purchase funds for the property, having drawn down the money from the bank, and obviously you're going to put your solicitor in funds for the various fees that I've set out, the professional indemnity or the professional legal fee, stamp duty, PRA fees and so on. With the new property it's slightly different. Not much different, but it's slightly different. With a new property you're going to pay a booking deposit. Then when it comes to paying the contract deposit, it may be possible to, if you are getting the Help to Buy grant or aid or subsidy or whatever you call it, if you're getting that, then it may be possible to actually use that as part of your deposit. So it may well be the case that if there's 30 grand due or 35 grand due with the contract, on signing the contract as a contract deposit, it's possible that up to 30 grand of it can be taken care of by the Help to Buy amount if you're eligible for that much. That's the maximum, I think. So most builders will allow you to use the Help to Buy amount to pay the contract deposit. So at the outset you'll be paying bank or booking deposit of 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever, and then the balance can come from your Help to Buy grant. And then you're going to need all the other money, your loan and your stamp duty, your professional legal fee, your property registration authority fees, and the other outlays, legal searches, commissioner for oaths, miscellaneous, and so on for completion. But clearly completion with a new house is going to take place probably much later than with a second hand, because the likelihood is that the new house may be in the course of construction, and depending then at what point you actually purchase the property or enter into the bargain, as it were, to purchase the property, and depending on what stage it is in terms of the construction phase and the construction schedule, the new property may not complete, the purchase may not complete until, there's a word there, oh, there's two words behind me there, you might see them. The new property may not be ready for completion for 6 months, 9 months or whatever. So that's the time schedule there. Now you could buy a new property that's practically finished and practically ready to go. If that's the case, then the time schedule is going to resemble more closely the time schedule for a second hand. But by and large, when you're buying a new property, you're looking at entering into an arrangement whereby you might be paying a booking deposit, you might be paying a contract deposit, and then you could be waiting 6 months, 9 months, indeed 12 months for completion of the property, for completion of construction. Anyway, hope you find this video useful. I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot. This video I want to take a look at the Help to Buy scheme. The Help to Buy scheme is a scheme that's administered by the Revenue Commissioners, which helps first-time buyers or first-time builders to get on to the property ladder. Essentially, it's a clawback or a relief that you're given, a contribution or a refund of income tax and dirt tax that you would have paid in a 4-year period. So the maximum amount that you were allowed to claim under the scheme or to get relief for a contribution essentially from the Revenue Commissioners towards the purchase of your house was 20 grand, but that was increased in 2021 to 30,000 euros. So the maximum you can get is 30,000 euros, and the aim of the scheme is to help first-time buyers or builders get onto the property ladder. Who can apply? You must be a first-time buyer, you must be tax compliant, you must live in the house for 5 years after purchase or building, and it must be your first purchase. What type of property? It must be a new property, can't be second-hand, and it must be a property that you're going to live in as opposed to a buy-to-let or investment property, and it must have a maximum purchase price of 500,000. That is the limit. How much can be claimed? As I said, it was 20 grand, maximum of 20,000. That has been increased to 30,000 or 5% of the purchase price or the amount of income tax and dirt tax that you've paid in the previous or in the 4 years prior to the application. It's the lesser of those three figures. So it's the lesser of 30 grand or 5% of the purchase price, or the income tax and dirt tax that you've paid in the 4-year period that you choose for the purpose of your application. In order to apply for your Help to Buy grant, as it were, you must do so on the either on the My Revenue portal or ROS, that's the Revenue Online Service, and obviously you apply through the Revenue Commissioners. There's 2 stages to it. There's an application stage and there's the claim stage. So the application stage is you making your application and showing that you're tax compliant and showing what your tax payments have been, how much tax you paid in the 4-year period that you've chosen, and so on. The claim stage then will involve, after you have signed a contract to purchase a property or for the building of it, you upload the contract, and you're supposed to upload a copy of the mortgage document as well, but quite frankly I haven't found that necessary. It seems to me that it's sufficient just to upload a copy of the contract. So basically you sign the contract in duplicate, you return it to the builder or vendor or solicitor, you get 1 copy back, and then you ask your solicitor for a copy of that, and your solicitor can send it to you by email or PDF, and you can upload it then to the Revenue website and you can complete your application. You'll get a claim number then, or a claim reference number, and you'll need to give this number and I think it's an access code or a passcode or something to your solicitor, who in turn then will give it to the vendor or builder solicitor, and the vendor solicitor or vendor or builder will draw down the funds directly from the Revenue Commissioners.
It's my experience that most vendors, most builders will allow you use the Help to Buy as a contribution towards your deposit. So when you're paying the deposit, let's just say your deposit is 30 grand and you've paid a booking deposit of 5 grand. So your contract deposit that you must pay when you sign the contract is 25,000. Most builders, most vendors will allow you to take into account the Help to Buy money that you are entitled to. When, and I forgot to mention this, when you actually apply to the revenue in the first instance, make your application for the Help to Buy, you will get a statement from revenue setting out exactly how much you are entitled to, so you'll be able to factor that into your calculations and into your cash outlays and so on. There is something that you need to be aware of, and that is that the revenue commissioners do have the power to claw back the grant if certain conditions or in certain circumstances. For example, if you weren't entitled to it in the first place, or if you cease living in the property for the 5 years succeeding, or you did not complete the transaction to purchase the property, it would be possible to actually draw down the grant and then not complete the sale. I've never seen it happen, but I suppose it's theoretically possible. And the final situation where there might be a clawback is where you would have got the grant for the purpose of building a property and you haven't completed the property, you haven't built it essentially. Hope you find this video useful. As the Help to Buy scheme, I come across it every day of the week, quite frankly, with new first time buyers and so on. It's a really good scheme if you're a first time buyer. It's a real leg up on the ladder, and it's obviously contributing, I suppose, you might argue, to a certain extent to house price rises and so on and so forth. But I mean, if you're a first time buyer and you want to buy a house and live in it and get onto the property ladder, then you know, when the revenue commissioners are giving you some sort of a clawback or some sort of a grant essentially towards the purchase of your property, it's not a bad day's work. Hope you find the video useful. If you do, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below, and you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you are, just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks a lot.
Okay, in this video I am going to take a look at the First Home Scheme. This is the scheme introduced by the government to support home ownership. I've got the pack here and I have a client coming in at in the afternoon today to sign up for it. So in the pack, and this will give you an idea of what's involved, we have the following documents. 1, a First Home Scheme agreement in duplicate, a copy of which has been sent to our clients. 2, a solicitor's undertaking. So we have to give an undertaking to the First Home Scheme body to register their charge on the property. Registering their charge will be similar to registering a mortgage on the property. 3, a solicitor's funds requisition form. So we send in a cheque requisition or a funds requisition form in the normal way, which you would with an ordinary loan from any lender. 4, an inhibition registration form. So this is the inhibition or the form that's going to be registered on the folio of the property, depending on whether it's registered property, land registry, or registry of deeds. Most properties will be land registry, and therefore the inhibition will be registered on the folio, and it'll be indicated there in the same way as a mortgage or charge will be registered. 5, a statutory declaration of the customer declaring eligibility for the First Home Scheme. 6, customer consent to registration of the inhibition in the Property Registration Authority of Ireland. So the customers, the clients, have to consent to the registration of the inhibition. The inhibition basically means that they can't sell the shop or property without first notifying the First Home Scheme and letting them know what they're proposing to do. And obviously it'll depend then on what's outstanding to the First Home Scheme body. But bottom line is, the persons who get money from the First Home Scheme will not be able to sell the property without the consent of the First Home Scheme body. And 7 then is certificate of title. So we have to then get our clients, and they're coming in this afternoon, to sign up various documents, and then we send them into the First Home Scheme equity facility. So we're going to be returning a copy of the signed mortgage letter of offer. That's the letter of offer to the clients of the amount of money that they're being given. 2 is the original solicitor's undertaking duly completed with a copy of our professional indemnity insurance. And that is just a similar undertaking that we give in a normal mortgage or loan situation. 3, the original family or first home scheme agreement. Then the original solicitor's funds requisition form and consent to the registration and of the inhibition duly completed by the client. So that's basically it. That's the documentation that we get. Clients sign up to that. We have to send in the documentation, solicitors undertaking, clients consent to registration of the inhibition and so on to the first home scheme body. In due course then we'll be able to draw down the funds on behalf of the client, or the money will be issued either to the client or to us, probably to us, and we then register the first home scheme charge on the folio, on the land registry folio, and that protects the first home scheme. Now it's a registration of an inhibition, so it's slightly different to a normal charge, but it's the same sort of principle. It's precisely the same principle as getting a loan from a bank, quite frankly. The first home scheme, then, the administration, their head office is in Maynooth, County Kildare, and there's there's information there about the first home scheme, eligibility rules, and so on and so forth. Then this is the first home scheme agreement. You'll be able to find out more about that online, but I might just do a little summary at the end of this, or in a few minutes time actually, when the clients have been in. I'll just take a look at it, and I did write a blog post about the first home scheme, so that might be useful to just explain to you what is involved and what are the sort of rules and regulations in very, very broad terms. It is a blog post, so it's very broad terms, but it will be of some benefit to you. So after my clients come in and after they sign up and sign the necessary papers, and they should be in about 20 minutes, it's lunchtime now here, they're coming in at 2 o'clock. After that then I'll finish off this video by just giving you a quick overview of the rules in relation to the first home scheme. Okay, the first home scheme was introduced by the government in July 2022. The purpose is to make it easier for first-time buyers to buy new homes. Some key points that you need to know about this. It's for first-time buyers. However, an applicant may also be eligible if he or she previously purchased or built a home but was in a relationship that is broken down and the applicant has no interest in the previous property. The applicant must have mortgage approval with a participating lender, borrow the maximum mortgage amount, have a minimum deposit of 10% of the purchase price. Participating lenders include AIB, Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB, EBS, Haven Mortgages. The buyer will be able to buy out the equity stake of the first home scheme, or the scheme will be repaid when the property is sold. So the buyer of the property can buy out the equity stake of the first home scheme in the property, or they can wait and pay off the first home scheme when the property is sold and pay off from the sales proceeds. If the equity stake is not paid within 6 years, the property owner will have to pay a service charge based on the funds supplied by the scheme at the outset. The service charges will be applied to the account from year 6. A house price ceiling will apply in each local authority area. The maximum amount available is up to 30% of the new property. This will be 20% if the buyer is availing of the Help to Buy scheme. It's worth noting that a buyer can avail of the Help to Buy scheme and this first home scheme. The property cannot be a self-build and must be bought as a principal private residence, not as an investment. The minimum equity share is 2.5% of the property price, or €10,000, whichever is higher. The money does not have to be paid back unless the property is sold or it's no longer the principal private residence of the applicant or the applicant dies, but you can choose to pay back some or all of the equity stake if you wish. The service charges then that will apply from year 6 are as follows. Year 6 to year 15, 1.75%. Year 16 to 29, 2.15%. Year 30 plus, 2.85%. these service charges as payment to the First Home Scheme for services related to the provision and servicing of the equity facility. So to the very good frequently asked questions on the First Home Scheme website, you should have a look at it, but that I hope gives you a good outline of the First Home Scheme support initiative for home ownership in Ireland. And obviously read the documentation very, very carefully yourself, do your own research, check the documents, etc. But that gives you a good broad outline, I think, of the First Home Scheme. It's worth noting as well that the equity facility provided by the First Home Scheme is linked to the value of your home, and any change in property prices will affect any partial or final redemption amounts. Just to give you an example, let's say the customer purchases a property for 250,000, availing of 25,000 from the First Home Scheme. That's a 10% equity share in your home that the First Home Scheme has. Sometime in the future you decide to buy out the First Home Scheme equity share. However, the house is now valued at 350,000. 10%, which is their equity share of 350,000, is 35 grand. So even though you got 25 grand in the first instance, you now have to pay 35,000 plus any accrued service charges to redeem the First Home Scheme equity share in the home. Likewise, if the price was to fall, for example, you paid 250 for the house, in the future then it's only worth say 200, well then 10% of that is 20 grand, and 20 grand plus any accrued service charges is what you have to pay back to the First Home Scheme in order to redeem the First Home Scheme equity in the property. That's worth bearing in mind, because it's linked to the equity in the property, it's linked to the value of the property, and obviously, you know, house prices can fall and rise, we all know that from experience. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot. Okay, in this video, it's only going to be a short one. It's to do with the notion or the use of legal searches when you're buying property. When you're buying property, your solicitor is going to have to carry out legal searches against the property and against the vendors and indeed against you, and so you need to understand what that cost is going to incur. It's only about 130 euros or thereabouts, and it will have to be done. Basically, it's a situation where the purchaser solicitor will carry out searches against the property and against the vendors, and will see if there's anything come up. When I say searches, I'm talking about bankruptcy searches, judgment searches, searches for any personal insolvency arrangements, and that will be against the individuals, both the vendor and the purchaser, if the purchaser is borrowing money. Secondly, the search will be against the property itself. In other words, there'll be a land registry, property registration authority folio search, and the purpose of that search will be to find out if any judgments or anything has cropped up on the folio since the contracts were originally issued. So that would really be to deal with any mortgages or any charges hanging over the property, or any unexplained burdens or events or happenings, that sort of thing. So that's what legal searches is about. It is an expense you're going to incur. It could range anything from 50 or 60 quid to 150 quid, depending on the property, depending on the many vendors, and depending on the many purchasers, and depending obviously as well on whether you're borrowing money or not. But that's what legal searches are all about. So hope you find this video useful. That would be a situation where you are purchasing property. Legal searches have to be carried out, and they have to be carried out on the day of closing. Before or after is no good, must be on the day of closing. As I say, if you find this video useful, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thank you. One of the things that people get exercised about, especially when they're buying a house, but indeed when they're selling, is the closing date. People get very fixated on the closing date, and they some people seem to think that buying a house is like buying a 2 litre of milk or something. In other words, you can decide to rock up to Super Value in Enfield and buy a 2 litre of milk. You can do that, no problem. But when it comes to the purchase or property sales and purchases and closing dates, it's a different situation. The closing date is the closing date until it changes or moves, and it can change and move quite easily. So you really must accept that. It's a stressful time buying or selling property, and I think I've made a video about that just to make that point, that it is a stressful time, and the best thing you can do at the outset is accept that it's a stressful time and not be unhinged or discommoded too much if something goes wrong or if there's a delay or a hold up or whatever, because there are so many moving parts. There's a solicitor acting for both sides, there's the planning issues, there's certificates of compliance, there's structural survey, there's probably going to be a bank. Their requirements will have to be fulfilled. There's going to be life assurance, home insurance. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pieces of a puzzle, pieces of a jigsaw, which must fall into place before the whole transaction can be consummated and completed and so on. So closing date is a closing date, that's fine, but often, very, very often, closing dates change and move, and with the best will in the world, you really must accept, one, that buying or selling property is a stressful activity, it's a stressful time, and you really need to be prepared for that. And two, closing dates are, to a great extent, aspirational. In other words, they can be written into the contract and so on, but things change, circumstances change, difficulties can arise, and you really need to accept and not get too discommoded, not be too put out of sorts if your closing date or if the transaction doesn't complete on the day that you expect it. I know you're going to have a difficulty in terms of organising moving vans and moving trucks and various other arrangements that you have to make, but you really do have to understand that property transaction has a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, as I say, which must fall into place for the completion of the transaction. And for that reason, closing date will be written into the contract, but it's not cast in stone. It can change. And to put it in context, if you want to get legal about a closing date or a sale not completing on the closing date, it's open to you as either vendor or purchaser to serve a 28-day notice. That kind of puts it in context, because if you think about it, if a sale is put back, for example, by 5 days, a week, 10 days, and you're not happy with it and you want to take action, the action you have to take is actually to serve a 28-day notice. So now you've gone from a 7-day delay or 5-day delay or 2-week delay to perhaps at least a 28-day delay. So the law is not going to come to your rescue to any great extent there. In other words, you really do need to roll with the punches and just accept that it's a stressful time and that closing dates can move. Hope you find this video useful. If you do, I'd appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot.
If you're buying a house, one thing that you need to be careful about is on closing day or completion day. Closing day is the day basically that when you're buying, the keys are handed over to you and you're given vacant possession. However, one tip that I would give you in relation to closing day, if you're buying, is to carry out a pre-closing or pre-completion inspection on the same day. This is going to do a couple of things. One, I have seen a situation where the people vacating the house, the sellers, have left a pile of rubbish, for example, in the driveway and in the garden of a particular property. Now this wouldn't happen too often. But it can happen from time to time, and you really don't want to find this problem after the money has been handed over by your solicitor and after you've been given the keys. So for that reason, you should carry out a pre-closing inspection. It should be organised for the same day as closing, and you can do that through the auctioneer. The second reason why you might want to do that is because you just need to check that there's no confusion or misunderstanding about the contents. Sometimes it's taken for granted that certain contents are included in the sale and certain contents are not included. However, sometimes there can be a bit of confusion. For example, you would assume that any appliance that's built in is going to stay, but that may or may not be the case. And the likes of stoves, wood-burning stoves, or even cookers, ovens, hobs, etc., if they're removed and you're left with perhaps dangling wires or pipes or fittings that need to be connected, it's going to be a bad start for you in your new home. Again, if you carry out a a pre-closing inspection, well then it's going to be apparent, and at that stage then you're in a stronger position to get the problem sorted, because your solicitor can hold on to the money and not release it until the difficulty or problem is solved. So if you're buying, I would suggest that you carry out a pre-closing completion or inspection. This is basically an inspection you carry out on the same day that the sale is going to close. Your solicitor is going to hand over the money to the vendor's solicitor and you are going to get the keys. But before that, a quick inspection will flag up or ensure that you are getting exactly what you thought you were getting. Hope you find this useful. I have a free report which I give away for free on my website, businessandlegal.ie. If you just stick your email address in the box, it'll be sent directly to your email account. It's simply a report about buying or selling a residential property in Ireland. I have quite a bit of experience in this area. I bought my first property in 1986, and it's a free guide and you can unsubscribe anytime, but it does give you some fairly good, fairly useful tips about buying or selling a residential property in Ireland.
When it comes to finding a property for yourself, whether it's residential or commercial, but certainly a residential property, and especially a second-hand residential property, there's something that you're going to have to keep in mind, and that is something I learned a good few years ago now at this stage, and it's probably self-evident to many people when they think about it, but people don't always think about it, and sometimes common sense is not so common. If you ever played any sport, you discover that whether you're into GA or football or hurling or soccer or rugby, or indeed if you're into racing or any other field of endeavour, you'll find that it is an absolute universal truth that no player, no horse has everything. In other words, you might have a player who is fantastic in a particular situation but has some weakness. Every player has a weakness because no player has everything, and it might be turning on his left side, turning on his right side, kicking with the left foot, or whatever. Likewise with racehorses, you're going to have a fantastic racehorse that'll get 2 miles, won't get 3. Likewise, you'll have a Guineas winner who won't get the 1.5 miles to win a derby, and so on. No horse, no player has everything. Likewise, when you're looking for a second-hand house, no property has everything. So you need to be prepared to compromise to a certain extent, and you need to obviously make up, I think, some sort of a matrix or some sort of a list, a short list of stuff that you will compromise on and stuff that you won't compromise on. But I would suggest that you need to be practical and you need to be pragmatic, and you need to bear in mind that no house, just like no footballer, just like no hurler, just like no rugby player, just like no racehorse, has everything. We all have infirmities or deficiencies or imperfections, and when you're buying a second-hand property, you're going to run into that. So don't beat yourself up and don't go down a complete rabbit hole in trying to find the perfect house, because the perfect house, like the perfect player, like the perfect horse, does not exist. Hope you find this video useful. If you do, you might give it the thumbs up down below, and you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you are, hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell icon, and you'll be notified every time I publish a new video. And I publish new videos every week, twice a week at least, Wednesday and Saturday, and most times Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. So